It happened in broad daylight, in the polished glass parking lot of one of the country's fastest-growing technology companies, where expensive luxury cars reflected the afternoon sun like trophies. Employees slowed their steps as laughter echoed across the entrance. A successful CEO pointed toward an old, dusty 1969 Camaro with faded paint, worn chrome, and years of honest miles written across every scratch. Beside that aging car stood a quiet single father wearing clean but inexpensive clothes, holding the hand of his young daughter while carrying himself with remarkable dignity. The laughter spread quickly because everyone assumed they already knew his story. They believed they were looking at another struggling contractor who had somehow wandered into the wrong place. None of them imagined that only 10 days later, the same man would return through those very doors, not as someone asking for work, but as the company's newest $100 million client, leaving every person who had judged him questioning how little they truly understood about success. Before we continue this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing family where stories remind us that appearances rarely tell the whole truth. Garrett Holloway had spent the last 8 years raising his daughter, Clara, completely alone after losing his wife to a sudden illness that changed every plan they had ever made together. Every sunrise became another opportunity to choose strength over grief. Every afternoon became another chance to show his daughter that dignity could survive hardship. The old Camaro was never simply a car. It had been his father's pride before becoming Garrett's responsibility, carrying memories of family road trips, first jobs, and promises that hard work would always matter more than expensive appearances. Money had become tight after years devoted to caring for his wife, yet Garrett refused to sell the Camaro because it reminded him that true wealth could never be measured by polished paint or luxury badges. Every weekday morning unfolded with quiet consistency. Garrett prepared breakfast, helped Clara with school projects, drove her to school in the rumbling Camaro, and then continued managing a small engineering consulting firm that almost nobody had heard about. From the outside, it looked insignificant. The modest office occupied part of an old brick building, employed only a handful of specialists, and avoided publicity completely. Most people assumed Garrett simply repaired industrial equipment because they never looked closely enough to discover that his team specialized in solving impossible infrastructure problems for international energy companies that valued discretion more than advertising. On that particular afternoon, Garrett arrived at the headquarters of Hartwell Dynamics after receiving an invitation to discuss a possible maintenance contract. He had parked carefully at the far end of the executive parking area because every other space was occupied by gleaming luxury vehicles. Clara had accompanied him since her school had finished early, happily reading a science magazine while waiting nearby. Vivian Mercer, the company's celebrated CEO, had built her reputation through relentless determination and remarkable intelligence. She had transformed a struggling technology startup into a respected corporation before turning 40. Newspapers admired her discipline. Investors admired her confidence. Employees admired her ambition. Yet success had slowly convinced her that expensive appearances reflected personal worth, and somewhere along that journey she had forgotten the humility that had once defined her earliest years. When Vivian noticed the dusty Camaro, she smiled with quiet amusement before making an unfortunate comment loud enough for nearby executives to hear. She suggested that perhaps the visitor had mistaken the company headquarters for a classic car museum. The executives laughed politely, eager to match the mood of their influential leader. Garrett simply looked toward his daughter, gently squeezed her shoulder, and smiled with calm reassurance instead of embarrassment. Clara noticed everything. Children always did. She asked her father why people laughed at old cars when they still carried people exactly where they needed to go. Garrett answered with gentle wisdom that stayed with her forever. He explained that some people become so focused on what shines outside that they forget to notice what lasts inside. Clara nodded thoughtfully, choosing compassion instead of resentment. The meeting itself lasted less than 20 minutes. Garrett calmly presented practical recommendations for improving one of Hartwell Dynamics' manufacturing systems. His suggestions were thoughtful, detailed, and remarkably cost-effective, but they were dismissed almost immediately because the executives had already decided that a man arriving in an aging Camaro could not possibly understand large-scale corporate operations. Vivian politely thanked him before choosing another consulting firm whose presentation looked more impressive despite offering weaker solutions. Garrett accepted the decision without complaint. He thanked everyone for their time, held Clara's hand, and quietly drove away beneath the bright afternoon sun. The laughter behind him faded into the distance while the old Camaro continued forward exactly as it always had, dependable despite every visible imperfection. During the following days, Hartwell Dynamics encountered increasingly serious engineering failures. The expensive consulting company they had hired struggled to identify the root cause of production delays that threatened millions of dollars in contracts. Every attempted repair created new complications. Deadlines slipped. Investors demanded explanations. Employees worked exhausting overtime while uncertainty spread throughout the company. Meanwhile, Garrett continued living exactly as before. His mornings belonged to Clara. His afternoons belonged to difficult engineering projects that required patience rather than publicity. Unknown to nearly everyone in Hartwell Dynamics, Garrett's consulting firm had quietly completed groundbreaking infrastructure solutions for several multinational corporations across Europe and North America. Those companies valued confidentiality so highly that Garrett rarely appeared in business magazines or public interviews. His greatest successes existed almost entirely behind non-disclosure agreements. 10 days after the unfortunate parking lot incident, Hartwell Dynamics prepared to welcome the representatives of Northbridge Energy Consortium, a global corporation planning one of the largest modernization projects in recent history. Winning the contract would transform the company's future. Every executive wore their finest business attire. Presentation rooms sparkled beneath the afternoon sunlight. Catered refreshments lined polished conference tables. Everyone waited anxiously for the arrival of the consortium's leadership. Luxury vehicles entered the parking area throughout the morning, but shortly before the meeting began, another familiar engine echoed across the pavement. Employees turned toward the entrance in disbelief as the dusty 1969 Camaro rolled quietly into a visitor's parking space. Some chuckled again, assuming another misunderstanding had occurred. Then everything changed. Senior representatives from Northbridge Energy immediately walked across the parking lot, not toward the executive entrance, but toward Garrett. Their faces lit with genuine respect. One after another, they greeted him warmly, thanking him for decades of brilliant engineering guidance that had quietly saved countless industrial projects around the world. Clara stood proudly beside her father while watching powerful executives treat him with admiration that could never be purchased. Vivian observed the scene from the front entrance, confused by what she was witnessing. Within moments, one of Northbridge's directors approached her with a welcoming smile before introducing Garrett Holloway as the principal engineering advisor who would personally oversee every technical decision regarding their $100 million partnership. The contract would only proceed if Garrett approved the collaboration because his expertise had earned extraordinary trust throughout the industry. Silence replaced laughter. No expensive watch, designer suit, or luxury vehicle had revealed Garrett's true influence. Years of integrity had done that. Instead, Vivian felt the uncomfortable weight of memory settle over her. She remembered the parking lot. She remembered her careless joke. Most painfully, she remembered the quiet dignity with which Garrett had accepted public embarrassment without returning cruelty. The afternoon meeting unfolded unlike anything anyone expected. Garrett displayed extraordinary technical knowledge, patiently explaining innovative solutions while encouraging collaboration instead of competition. Rather than exposing Hartwell Dynamics' earlier mistakes, he respectfully acknowledged the company's strengths and proposed practical improvements. Every recommendation reflected generosity rather than pride. Clara spent part of the afternoon reading in a nearby lounge where several employees introduced themselves kindly after realizing how unfairly she and her father had been treated before. She responded with warmth that reflected everything Garrett had taught her about forgiveness. She never criticized anyone. She simply smiled, answered questions about school, and spoke lovingly about restoring the old Camaro together every weekend because it reminded her of her grandfather. That innocent conversation quietly spread throughout the building. Employees began reflecting upon how easily they had joined laughter directed towards someone they had never taken time to know. Many remembered moments from their own lives when they had been judged unfairly because of clothes, neighborhoods, or circumstances beyond their control. The building slowly filled with quiet self-examination. Later that afternoon, Vivian requested a private conversation with Garrett before final documents were signed. She admitted that success had gradually convinced her she could evaluate people within seconds. She confessed that she had failed to recognize humility because she had become distracted by appearances. Most importantly, she sincerely apologized for the humiliation she had caused both Garrett and Clara. Garrett listened carefully before speaking with remarkable calm. He explained that forgiveness never erased painful memories, but it prevented those memories from controlling the future. He admitted that Clara had been hurt more by the laughter than he had because children naturally believed adults should know better. Yet he also believed people deserved opportunities to become wiser after recognizing their mistakes. Vivian's eyes filled with emotion as she realized genuine leadership required more than intelligence or financial success. It demanded character strong enough to admit failure openly and change because of it. Over the following months, Hartwell Dynamics transformed in ways that reached far beyond financial growth. Recruitment practices shifted toward recognizing talent rather than appearances. Scholarship programs expanded for students from struggling communities. Employees volunteered together in local schools, mentoring young people whose potential often went unnoticed. Company culture gradually became known for respect instead of prestige. Garrett never accepted special treatment because of the contract's enormous value. He continued driving the same dusty Camaro each morning, often arriving before everyone else. Eventually the vehicle became something of a quiet symbol inside the company. New employees learned its story during orientation, not because the car itself mattered, but because it reminded everyone that greatness often arrived disguised as ordinary perseverance. Clara grew older watching adults prove that people could genuinely change when they chose humility over pride. She saw Vivian become one of her strongest mentors, encouraging her interest in engineering while supporting educational programs for other children facing difficult circumstances. Their friendship grew naturally because forgiveness had created space for trust to replace embarrassment. Years later, visitors entering Hartwell Dynamics often noticed the beautifully restored 1969 Camaro displayed during community charity events. Garrett had finally completed its restoration together with Clara, preserving every meaningful detail while keeping its original spirit alive. The car no longer represented financial struggle. It represented endurance, family, quiet faith, and the remarkable truth that real value cannot be measured by first impressions. People occasionally asked Garrett whether he regretted never replacing the old vehicle with something more luxurious after achieving tremendous financial success. He always smiled gently before explaining that some possessions reminded us where we came from, who believed in us, and why kindness should never depend upon appearances. Those reminders were worth more than any luxury automobile ever built. Before we reach the end of this story, please leave a meaningful comment sharing a time when someone surprised you after being underestimated, or tell us what lesson about kindness and judging others touched your heart the most. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the afternoon sun settled gently across the restored Camaro, Garrett and Clara drove away with peaceful smiles, not because the world had finally recognized their worth, but because they had never allowed the world's shallow opinions to define it in the first place. The greatest victory had never been the $100 million contract. It had been protecting kindness in the face of humiliation, choosing forgiveness over revenge, and proving that genuine character shines far brighter than polished metal ever could. Those who had laughed discovered that respect cannot be earned through wealth alone, while those who had remained humble learned that hope always finds its way back to hearts willing to believe in second chances.